Lights Out by Lucian Meyer. A small plastic Christmas tree on his desk was the only thing in the room giving off light. Except, of course, the three large LCD monitors. A smile played on his face. It had taken almost 6 months to get to tonight. To say he was excited would not even come close. He wiggled in his seat as he downed the third energy drink of the night. He tossed the can into the trash. Jimmy better get back soon. I'm going to need another one of those quick, he thought to himself. Jimmy was his assistant, a young hacker that had been good enough and lucky enough to track him down. Over a month of badgering and he'd finally gotten him to admit who he was. Now, in the hacking world, there are many names you might know. But to be wholly honest, the best ones are the ones you've never heard of. And Michael was absolutely fine with that. He grinned again. Tonight I'm going to show him something, he mumbled to himself. Christmas would hit New York officially in 45 minutes, and then he would bring his gift to the world. The door cracked, and in swooshed Jimmy. Everything? Jimmy started to question, but was cut off by a look that said very clearly, everything is just fine. Sorry, he squeaked and dropped into his chair. His 3 screens popped up, adding more light to the room. He tossed over a Hot Pocket, an energy drink, and most importantly, a pack of cigarettes. Kinda lucky the store was even open on Christmas, Jimmy said. No one respects Christmas anymore, Michael snorted. Jimmy smiled big. Oh, and what you're planning tonight is real respectful? Jim. If you're gonna sin big, he said and smiled and pulled out a smoke. Not that Jimmy wasn't on board. He was completely committed to the prank. It would be the largest in history. Jimmy had heard about G-Bridge, and the minute he heard the first story, he knew that he had to meet the guy. Jimmy wanted to be a hacker, but not one of the best, but the best. It had taken him 2 years and lots of his dad's money, but he'd found him. And somehow he had gotten Michael to take him on as an apprentice of sorts. Translated, he did a bunch of garbage code work, ran errands, and did the dishes. But it was all worth it. Michael didn't type or use a computer. He spoke to it, and it spoke back. Michael was more than just G-Bridge. He had many names throughout the years. As Jimmy got in closer over the year they had hacking together, he realized how many fantastic hacking stories that Michael had been part of. Jimmy was happy to come in during the G-Bridge time, though. He shifted nervously in his seat. Michael was the best, there really was no doubt, but there had been a few that questioned his ability. Michael was smart and didn't get sucked into that stuff very often, but this time he felt he had to pull it off. And if he did, then the hacker named G-Bridge would go down in infamy. Michael and Jimmy knew that they would most likely be found and arrested, and then, without much delay, be put into jail for a few years. But for the hacker, this would be the largest accomplishment to date. They spoke of small things until 10 minutes before Christmas and midnight would arrive on the East Coast. The seconds ticked down as they both re-verified their access and roles. 6 minutes before, Michael looked up and said, "Go." And their hands were in a flurry. And the clock struck midnight, and every light in the United States of America went out. For 10 seconds, everything was eerily quiet. People sat in the dark, and then the power came back. But not to everyone. In fact, there was no rhyme or reason to it. The employees, unlucky enough to be stuck at work, had no idea why any of this was occurring. The partial outage lasted for 10 minutes, and then the power went out completely again. For 10 seconds. And then all the lights came back on, and all the systems came back online. Of course there was damage, but the computer networks and internet connections came back very quickly. And still, no one had any idea what had happened. Well, excepting 2 people. He sat at the monitors, the last command was entered, and the last keystroke made. "We did it," he smiled, and Jimmy grinned. They sat back and watched the news feed. The question was, when would the rest of the world figure it out? We are following all angles of the story. We've called all power departments, and so far we haven't found anyone that knows what happened or who fixed it. They prattled on about this theory and that, which made Michael and Jimmy roll their eyes. And then, out of the large network control room, "Carl, come see this!" he shouted out. He ran over and his face went white. "The heck does this mean?" They both sat in silence, looking at a satellite image. All right, see if we can get an image of the whole thing from the public sats, maybe. A minute after he said it, they pulled up a set of over 17 frames of the prank in perfect view. All right, I am being told that we have a major breakthrough from our newsroom. They are preparing graphics for us that I am told we will receive in just a few seconds, the newscaster said, holding his ear to provide just a bit of drama, and then popped up on the screen. The newscasters looked and were struck silent. There was a pause, and then he spoke again. It appears as if we're looking at, But he could not find the words. Michael buried his head. Damn it! It's screwed up! Michael said, looking at the picture. Jimmy's smile dropped off his face. The bridge is not on there. The whole East Coast didn't fire, Jimmy observed, but Michael was already at his computer trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Well, it appears as if we're looking at a giant peace symbol, and the letter G, and a dash, created using our own lights with limited power outage. If your power was on, you were part of one of these three pieces. I am being told that we still have no information on who has done this, he said, but he had his suspicions. The other networks picked up the story and spread it across the world, and the G was not found out to be G Bridge because it became assumed that the G was for God. God was sending all the human race a message. God wanted peace, and from his method of delivery, he was not toying around about it. The news channel avoided the idea for a while, but eventually everyone began to accept that God had talked to the human race, and those who did not believe in God did not necessarily disagree with the message. Either way, no one dared lift a weapon. Peace came. They had been watching the news all night. Michael flipped the reporter on mute. He turned to Jimmy. What did we do? I think you might have created world peace, Jimmy said. The reports had flooded in from all over the world. Violence was ceasing to happen all over the world. Peace had come. Talk about playing God. The world changed that Christmas Day. We as a race remembered, or we were reminded, that we work much better together, and the peace lasted and spread until truly world peace had finally come. 6 days later, they sat in a bar for New Year's. No one really dug into the truth, and therefore Michael and Jimmy were never even tracked. In fact, no one was even looking for them. They smiled and drank and even spoke to some girls. They rung in the new year at midnight, and Jimmy clinked his glass and said, "To the biggest hack ever," they toasted. They had a driver take them home, and Jimmy looked over at Michael. "You never figured it out, did you?" he asked. "No, it should have worked," Michael said, still trying to understand why the East had not lit up his name. Maybe it wasn't all us, Jimmy asked with a smile. Well, yeah, only God could have known that it would turn out this way, Michael said, looking out at the city. Well, I'm glad it did. Happy New Year, Michael. Happy New Year, Jim. The car cruised through the city streets, and it started to snow. And in the end, does it matter where the message comes from? Or is it more important that the message peace be followed by all of us? Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's to you and yours. Let's work together to make the world a better place for all of us.